Hello and welcome to episode number 14 of the Lewiston Tribune podcast. My name is Trevan Pixley, the online editor at the Lewiston Tribune, and it has been a hectic, I would say about week for the football teams on the Palouse. So much so, it's probably been one of the biggest area stories in sports this year. And to help me break it all down, we got sports writer Sam Taylor, who's been covering both beats, really kind of carrying the sports section on his back recently. Sam, how you doing, man?
Great, Trevan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so to kick things off here, both Idaho and Washington State obviously got hit with departures that are going to have a lasting impact. For WSU right now, there's a lot more questions than answers for the Cougars, but for the Vandals, some of those questions are starting to become answers, starting with the head coaching hire of Thomas Ford, who was the team's running backs coach from 2022 to 2023, and it was nice to see Idaho attack this hire, get it done quickly, so they could kind of search for more answers. At least that's how I took it, Sam.
Absolutely, yeah. So the interesting thing about this college football calendar is that the transfer portal closes December 28th, the first winter portal. There's another portal that opens in April, and there's some exceptions here or there for players that lose their coach or whatnot. But the reality was, if Idaho wanted to put themselves on the best track for the rest of the year, they needed to act fast. And that's the case for Washington State as well, who are, about 4 days behind Idaho in terms of needing to replace a coach. Mm-hmm. But if you're an Idaho fan, you've got to be ecstatic, and you probably are ecstatic about Thomas Ford Jr. Players, too. In the days following Jason Eck's departure for New Mexico, multiple players hopped on Twitter, tagged Thomas Ford, said, "We'd love for you to be our head coach." They encouraged fans to email the athletic director and encourage her to hire Thomas Ford as soon as possible. And you had fans as well who were doing that on their own. They were taking the cues of the players. The fans and the players went to bat for Thomas Ford. And Thomas Ford, in his press conference today, said that is what meant a lot to him. That's probably the highest he's ever been in terms of mood as being a coach, is having players want you to be their coach, having the players buy in. And, he's been touted as a great recruiter. He recruited a lot of the core Vandals that have been a part of this team for the last few years. And, as a member of Jason Eck's staff in 2022, the original staff, and then in the year after that, really helped the Vandals establish this winning tradition of 3 straight FCS playoff appearances. And he said even though he wasn't on the team, wasn't a part of the team in 2024 this year, as he was running backs coach at Oregon State, he said that he would watch every single game he could. He said that he went to the Nutcracker Ballet the night that Idaho played Montana State, but he was watching the game under the seats, keeping an eye on his Vandals. And he's someone who's spent a lot of time in Moscow at various stages of his athletic career, both as a student athlete competing in track meets at the Kibbie Dome, and in high school going to camps in Moscow, and and then as an assistant coach. And so Moscow's been a part of his life. He had bits and pieces at various stages, and just the Northwest football community has been a huge part of his life and really defined his career. And so be able to stay in the Northwest, return to Idaho, see a lot of familiar faces, and just be received so positively. He's exactly the right fit. Home run hire is a term that is very applicable to this situation. Thomas Ford, I think if you're a Vandal fan, you have a lot to be excited for about this hire.
Yeah, I think the right words are, home run hire. I mean, Idaho nailed this pick with Thomas Ford. I mean, when he took the podium for this press conference, I also watched it. Sam was in the crowd asking questions, doing a great job. Like I said, this kid is killing it, doing the Idaho and the WSU beat. Read all of his stuff in the Tribune sports section. But he has a lot of charisma, and it seems like he knows what he wants to do, and it's not too dissimilar from Jason Eck and what he already built in Moscow. He said this wasn't a rebuild. This is a situation where there's talent already in Moscow, and they just need to build on what they already have. Something else that I liked from him is that he didn't shy away from the NIL questions. He didn't shy away from talking about things that Idaho needs to do in order to keep players around. How do you think he answered those questions as far as navigating NIL and the transfer portal? And what do you think he's going to do to kind of benefit Idaho in the future?
Well, I think he hit the nail on the head in terms of just fans needing to buy in and embrace this new era of college football. Ultimately, if the Vandals want to compete, even with some of the FCS programs,
Yes.
and recruit guys away from the Montanas and the Montana States of the world and the Dakotas, excuse me, he's going to need a rabid fan base supporting not only in terms of going to games and, athletic fund donations, but also just buying into this NIL side of things. And that was something that, was reportedly a roadblock for Jason Knack, and just he wasn't able to get that, off the ground to the extent that he wanted. But if Idaho hopes to be able to compete and continue this trajectory of the program, they're going to need that NIL infrastructure. And so for him to come from Oregon State, and they have, their NIL collective, Damnation, is, I guess, forgive my French, one of the best NIL collectives in the nation in terms of their size and what their ability, in that they're able, we just saw them bring in one of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal yesterday. And Oregon State did that. Obviously, they didn't do that by lowballing the kid. They did that by, giving him a great offer. And obviously, the Career Collective is starting to get there. They gave John Mateer, we'll talk about this later, but John Mateer a 7-figure offer, and he ultimately chose, a $3 million offer at Oklahoma. What are you going to do? You can't really do anything to counteract that if you don't have $3 million, which Wazoo doesn't. And not to say Idaho is going to have, anywhere necessarily what Oregon State has or what Wazoo has, or, programs larger than that as well. But the hope is that they'll have more than they have now. And I think that he just learned that, what he said, in terms of, I asked Coach Ford what he's learned about from NIL, from working at Oregon State, what he's learned about NIL from working at Oregon State. And he said that you've got to reward good play. You've got to reward kids that, committed to you, trusted you, and it's not enough to say, all right, you're already here, you're on the roster, and you want to leave, you can, but you're already here, so we're not going to give you NIL. You got to, say, hey, we appreciate your loyalty. Here's, X amount of money for being a part of this team and rewarding the hard work and the dedication that his players put in. And so I think that is something that is going to really help the Vandals. We look at a lot of these players in the transfer portal, and probably no matter what, a lot of these players, Jordan Dwyer, Mark Camper, Dallas Afalava, more guys like that, they're probably, they're getting offers from UW, Wazoo, USC, these larger, Wisconsin.
Hamper committed to Wisconsin today.
Wow.
As of recording Friday. He's gone to Wisconsin. Jackson X getting offers from Michigan State. I mean, there's a lot of guys for Idaho right now that are in the portal that should take these offers and should get the money when they can. It's similar to the Jason Eck coaching situation where, you can't hate the player in that situation. He's going to get paid. But there are some, depth pieces. There are some other, maybe offensive line starters that are in the portal right now that could come back. I know Thomas Ford mentioned in his press conference that he had a meeting, it was on Wednesday, and about, I think he said 80 or more players showed up. So I think that's a good sign. And that was kind of what the rumor was that Thomas Ford, if he was the coach that the Vandals signed, that they had a good potential to retain a good chunk of this roster. And we're kind of starting to see that pay off for the Vandals here. Something else I liked during this press conference, Sam, was that Thomas Ford admitted during his time at Simon Fraser, he kind of wanted to call the plays. He wanted to be a play caller, but, now he's kind of learned from that, and he wants to be more of a CEO, right? He kind of wants to build this team and, do things more in that sort of way. And he hires internally offensive coordinator Matt Lenahan, who is a legend in Moscow, former quarterback, was a receivers coach and did great work with Mark Hamper, Jordan Dwyer, you mentioned, Hayden Haddon, Jermaine Jackson, both pros in the NFL and the Canadian League. I mean, what a great get for Thomas Ford, and it seems like those two are close, and that should benefit the Vandals.
Absolutely. Matt Lenahan said today that, he had other offers, but he chose to partner with Thomas Ford to return to Moscow just because he believes in what they can build together. And he said that the offense, he's going to add some of his own wrinkles. It's not going to be exactly carbon copy the same as what we saw Jason Knack and his staff run, but it's going to be very similar. They're going to have, those core philosophies and, I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be obviously on Thomas Ford and Matt Linehan to decide if they go for it on fourth down or as much as they want. But he was saying, Thomas Ford was saying, like the Vandal Insider podcast yesterday, that those gadget plays and some of those quirks that have really defined the Vandal offense, and both frustrated and fascinated fans over the past 2 years are going to remain a part of the Vandal identity, in whatever way that transpires. And so, but yeah, Matt Linehan, just a great hire. I think that he'll. And in terms of player retention, he's gained the players' trust. Mm-hmm. He's someone who can. I mean, Thomas Ford's obviously is the driving force of that player retention. But Matt Linehan is a proof of like, hey, we really appreciate the work that you've all put in. We appreciate what we've been able to build together. Let's continue to build this. 3 straight FCS playoffs appearances. There's no reason why that streak has to end.
Yeah, and it seems like he's going to get close to rounding out his staff. He said that tomorrow they have interviews lined up. From
9 interviews.
Yeah, 9 to 5. He said that he has interviews lined up. Maybe just give some closing thoughts on Idaho before we transition to WSU, who is, no doubt in probably a way worse situation right now than the Vandals. On where you see Idaho right now, and are they on the right track, Sam? Are the Vandals on the right track?
I would say so. I think if you're a Vandal fan, just to contrast situations a little bit, you got to feel. Excuse me. You probably saw this coming, Jason Eck's departure. Whereas if you're a Kook fan, this Jake Dicker departure was definitely a blindside. For Jason Eck, obviously, FCS coach, 3 straight playoff appearances, improved his win total every year, generated multiple pro players from his program in the last couple of years. That is the kind of resume that gets you hired somewhere else very quickly. And sure enough, he got an opportunity in New Mexico, FBS. Now, obviously, the Mountain West is going through its own drama, but nonetheless, it's a pay raise, it's a profile raise, and it's a chance for him to continue his career. And I think if you're a Vandal fan, you've got to be happy for Jason Eck for leaving the program in such a strong place. Their Vandals had 2 winning seasons prior to his arrival, in the 22 years prior to his arrival, excuse me. But obviously he's delivered 3 straight winning seasons and playoff appearances and 2 straight quarterfinals since then. And so with Thomas Ford Jr., that's a continuation of that legacy. That's a continuation of what has been built. And so it's Idaho, saying we're serious about winning. We're serious about, your support and your investment in this Vandal program to the fans. And I think for the players, it recognizes, hey, we also honor your commitment to this university and your desire to play here, and so we want to give you a coach that you want to play for, and that's exactly who they got in Thomas Ford. So yeah, lots of reasons to be encouraged.
Moving over to Pullman now, you've been busy. We've mentioned it, doing these 2 beats at once. So it's been a while since you've opened up on a Tuesday morning quarterback or kind of giving your takes on the Cougs. So, I kind of just want you to, take this open mic here and kind of give your thoughts on where the Cougs are right now and just everything that they've been through just recently. I mean, it's been something.
Yeah, well, first, a couple numbers for you. 25 plus Cougs in the transfer portal, 13 starters. Head coach gone, OC gone, defensive coordinator gone, quarterbacks coach gone, running backs coach gone, assistant offensive line coach gone, general manager gone. All these staff members. Obviously Jeff Schmedding was fired. About several weeks ago, a week after the season. But everyone else has taken different jobs and different opportunities. And then for those players that have left, you saw John Mateer follow his OC Ben Arbuckle to Oklahoma. Excuse me. You've seen, Chris Hudson, who, was one of the top receivers for the Cougars this year. Go to Arizona. All these players, get these bigger, larger opportunities. Wayshawn Parker, their breakout star freshman running back, followed his running backs coach to Utah. And some of these things are natural. Like you're going to see, coaches leave and players who they individually recruited follow them to their stop. Like that's just normal of college football. But why it's affecting Wazoo so much is that Wazoo, the athletic department cut $11 million from its budget just in the past year. They now have a $74 million budget, which is smaller than some schools in the Mountain West. And, for being a school that's, forging this new path for the new Pac-12, you want your investment to rival that of other schools at the level that you want to be at. And right now their investment has dropped off. And so but obviously with Jake Digger's departure, that kind of was a reflection of that lack of stability. In his he never went out and said, I left Wazoo because they're unstable, and they asked my staff to take pay cuts, and I myself took a 10% pay cut to cover my assistants' salaries. All those things are true, and are probably the reasons why Dickard left, but he's not going to say that. But what he did say in his introductory press conference at Wake Forest is that he chose Wake Forest, which is, historically a really bad football program, because, one, he values stability, and Wake Forest offers him stability, even if that stability is the status quo of just losing seasons. And then, two, he thinks he can recruit the South a lot better than he could recruit the Northwest. One of his comments, which Thomas Ford just kind of indirectly contrasted in his press conference today, Jake Dickard said that at Wazoo, I'm surrounded by Canada, Utah, and Idaho. Not exactly the recruitment mecca. Now, obviously, that ignores California and Texas and Washington itself, Seattle area having a lot of talent, and just the talent that does exist in here in the Northwest and on the West Coast. And it ignores the fact that in North Carolina, I'm sure, yes, they've got Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina to recruit from, but they're competing with the SEC, the other ACC schools, all the other big brands. There's a lot more competition for, including Bill Belichick now, just up the road in North Carolina. And so it's going to be a very interesting stage for Jake Dickard's career. But the reason why it just feels so blindsiding to Coug fans is that, the day before he took the job on Monday, he was preaching loyalty. I actually asked him, hey, are any other players on the fence? Does you expect anybody else to leave? He said, I hope that everyone who's here is here. If you show up to practice, we're committed to seeing this thing out. And they've got a bowl game now in just a week.
Yeah.
And then 24 hours later, news leaks that, or a little more than that, a few more hours than that, news leaks that he's accepted this job. There's a private flight that shows up from Pullman to North Carolina overnight that has Twitter in a buzz. And then the next day, he's on this plane. And before he posts any sort of thank you to Washington State outside of Wake Forest press release, he posts this picture on this plane of, his family and some of the staff members that he's taken with him. Says, see you soon, Deacons, and, wheels up. So it's been a very dramatic week for Pullman, and there's a lot of reasons to feel, upset, but there's also a lot of reasons to feel that for the Cougs, this could be a needed restart.
Yeah, and you say needed restart because it seems like they're starting at ground zero right now. Like it really does. Like they don't have a whole lot to build from here. Is that true? Do they have anywhere to kind of build this team from within, or do they really have to completely hit that restart button? And what is this Holiday Bowl going to look like? What players are going to be suiting up for the Cougs, and do they have a chance in that one against Syracuse?
If you're a betting man, you should probably take Syracuse to be safe. But if you're insane, you should take Wazoo and make that bank.
Yeah.
Because the players, the players that are staying, the seniors, this is their last college football game. Kyle Thornton, Andrew Edson, these guys have been key contributors for the Cougs over the years. Excuse me. And they said, they're motivated to play in this game because it's, their last, could be, likely, their last organized football game of their entire lives. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, they're not going to quit. They don't want to just back down just because the coaches and a lot of their teammates are gone. But on the other side of that, it does not look good in terms of just winning. But I think it sounds cheesy. Obviously, the goal is to win every game, I'm sure. But, this game means a lot more than just the final score. Mm-hmm. It's all about this final week that they spend together, the process of going to a bowl trip. For some of these guys, this could be the only bowl trip they go to. And, if the future Cougar football is grim, then maybe it could be. But if, it's a valuable thing, I think, to participate in this bowl game. And Pete Callaghan, who was the defensive tackles coach, is the acting head coach. He said that, I'll worry about me on December 28th, the day after the bowl game. And so until then, it's all about these, 120 souls, or, what's left.
It is a crazy process in college football that your defensive tackles coach has become the head coach.
Indeed.
That is the most bananas thing I have ever heard.
Yeah.
That you said the defensive tackles coach is now the head coach.
Right.
That is crazy. Who's going to be suiting up at quarterback, and how far was he down the depth chart to start the year?
Well, the nice part is that for Wazoo is that he was number 2,
okay.
number 2 the whole year. They've only lost one quarterback, and that's obviously John Mateer, with their record-setting quarterback who went to Oklahoma. But Zevi Eckhouse, who was a senior transfer, he played the FCS level at Bryant University. He chose Wazoo. Was said he'd have a fair shot at competing for the starting role. I'm sure the coaching staff intended, unless a miracle were to happen, or that John Mateer would be the guy, just because as we saw this year, he was that kind of quarterback, that talented. But Zevi, was a decent backup. He was at the FCS level. He dominated, and in limited action, he was decent. Like obviously in garbage time and late situations, he's played very few snaps for Wazoo. But when he can do that, and he's a great public speaker. Like his interviews this week have been very encouraging, and he's can rally the troops. He's the good quarterback archetype. That's kind of the guy you want. And so, the thing is, one of the criticisms of him that in training camp, and one of the reasons he didn't get the job is, he just kind of struggles with the deep ball. Mm-hmm. And with Syracuse, that may be an issue. Obviously, Kyle McCord, Syracuse's quarterback, was the top passer in the FBS. He had the most passing yards, over 4,000 in the nation. And Syracuse has only lost about 9 players to the transfer portal. And so Syracuse is walking into this game largely at full strength, maybe missing a few pieces here and there, but they've got one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. Wazoo already struggled against the pass, and now they've lost most of their secondary and their entire interior defensive line. They're that top 3 defensive linemen, and so there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical that Wazoo will win this, but they're still going to play this game and take home the payout and honor the players and the seniors' commitment. So
yeah, is there any way to save this roster, you think, with any hire, or most of these guys gone?
I think most of these guys are likely gone.
Yeah.
I will be very surprised if anybody actually follows Dickert to Wake Forest, just because it seems, based on the reactions from some of the public reactions from the players, that were pretty vulgar. I mean, one of them was vulgar, so I won't say it. But there are some harsh criticisms of Dickert that have been expressed. Everyone who's spoken directly to the media has obviously been very cordial, and that's college football. We got to deal with it. But there have been some public reactions that have been kind of truthful in their expressions. But I think most of these guys are probably gone, just because you commit to this. You had a guy who last week said, "I bleed Cougar blood," and today he's in the transfer portal, and wide receiver Josh Meredith, and so. And you ultimately can't fault these guys, because these guys signed up not only to coach for Coach Dicker's program, but for their position coaches, who will most likely all be gone. Because obviously the new head coach, whoever it is going to bring in their own guys. They might retain 1 or 2, but the staff that you trusted, the program that you committed to, is changing. Now, obviously, Wazoo, the campus is the same, the facilities are the same, but that's only part of the equation. A lot of these guys choose it because of their teammates, their coaches, the exact program, that their role, their promised role. And so I think Wazoo's pretty much starting from scratch. There's a lot of, different candidates out there that may or may not, bring their own flavor. And Montana State's Brett Vegan, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you coming up next is how alarming is it, and how much does it really set Wazoo back that they don't have a head coach right now? And who do you think some of the likely candidates are, if you think any of them are likely candidates?
Yeah, well, the transfer portal closes in a week. So if they want to, tap into this, they had one transfer, a 6'7" tight end, excuse me, who now is decommitted from Wazoo and shared offers from Oklahoma. So likely, what was bringing him to Wazoo? Ben Arbuckle, John Mateer, just a chance to because John Mateer threw the most touch. Cooper Mathers caught the most as a tight end for the Wazoo this year, caught the most touchdowns by a tight end in a single season in Wazoo history this year, like 6 or 7, and that was because, he was just money. Mateer to Mathers was a great connection in the red zone, and so you've lost a lot. They have no transfer portal commitments. They're losing 25 guys or more, and so, you want a coach who can recruit, coach, and program build, and represent, and basically they want somebody who wants to be there. Please help me on pronunciations here, but Montana State's current coach, Brett Vegan, right? Yeah. So he obviously, he's in the semifinals right now at FES. He could be headed towards the championship. But the thing about hiring Vigen is that, one, obviously they can't really contact him. Well, they probably could find a way, but they can't formally interview or hire or anything until after he's done with his season, which could be this weekend or next weekend, or could be after the championship, after the FCS national championship, January 6th. And so that kind of puts him in a bind because, yes, obviously he could bring his Montana State players with him. Scott Trey Humphrey from Seattle, Rainier Beach, is the top running back with like 1,300 yards rushing, like 1,100 yards rushing rather. Like he'd be a good get for Wazoo if he came along with Vigen. But a lot of the other players, obviously he's proven at Montana State that he can win, he can build a program. Offense is very dynamic. They run quite a bit, run very dramatically. So he'd be a good fit. It's just no one knows if he wants to do it, and no one will know, including Wazoo, until their season is done. And then if he says no, that puts you at a massive disadvantage. And I'm sure they have a way of obtaining an answer, yes or no, or an interest before then, but that you're taking a risk if you wait for Vigen. There's Jamarcus Shepard. He was a one-year wide receivers coach for Wazoo in 2016. He spent time at Purdue. He's currently the Alabama's co-OC. Excuse me. He would bring, obviously an SEC mind and experience. And so I don't know much about him, but I know that, he's a name that's been thrown out there that's been interesting. There's Nevada's current coach, Choate. Yeah. The former Montana State coach.
Yeah. What's his first name? I can't think about his first name. You can just keep going. But Choate, former Montana State guy. And he...
Jeff Choate,
Jeff Choate. I want to say Danny for some reason.
Yeah.
I had Danny on my mind, but I didn't want to say it. Yeah, Jeff Choate.
Yeah, and I mean, he's head coach of Montana State. Now he's at Nevada. This is probably the least inspiring hire, just based off of, I think he had a 3-win season at Nevada this year. And, excuse me. And he, one of those wins was over Oregon State, I believe, and he called the Pac-2 the Pac-Who, so I don't know if he's willing to put his animosity towards the Pac-12 away to work for them, but who knows? But we'll see. There's a lot. It's Wazoo. Obviously, they got a bowl game to worry about, but at the larger level, they've got a head coach hiring to worry about, and the more time they wait, the less opportunity there is to build a roster. Because all these kids in the transfer portal, they're not going to wait for Wazoo to make a decision if that's one of their offers, including some of the former Vandals. They're going to make a decision soon. And if Wazoo doesn't have a coach, essentially doesn't have a program, then they're going to be left behind by a lot of these transfer guys who are making these decisions soon. Yeah,
it's weird too, because I mean, if Wazoo doesn't have a coach right now, are they still sending out these offers? And if they are, I wonder who's sending out these offers.
Right. Yeah, that's the question. Like, who? I mean, is Calgus doing all of that? I mean, his role is very much on field, committed to the current team, and then he might be gone. Probably will be gone soon.
Defensive tackles coach to recruiter,
head
coach, dude, just give him the job.
Wow.
I don't know anything about him other than the fact that he went from defensive tackles coach to interim head coach, and I think that's sick. As a former defensive lineman, but yeah, it looks like the Cougars could be in trouble, but they always like to keep you on the edge of their seat, those Cougars. Any final words about Wazoo before we get this thing out of here?
I mean, it just seems that the reality, this all boils down to money and a lack of it for Wazoo. Not only, obviously they have to pay a football coach, but they have to pay, their men's basketball program. David Riley, their head coach there, who was formerly at Eastern Washington, is making, about $600,000 this year. Cami Etheridge has been a long-time women's basketball coach. She's stayed committed to the program, getting a 1-year extension each of the last few years. But, how long does she hang around? And it all boils down to, these coaches feeling supported and committed. Dickard obviously didn't because he left. And that's not to say that, it wasn't all bad. But he obviously made a choice to go somewhere else to a externally quite unattractive offer. Yes, he's probably getting a pay raise, maybe even doubling the salary, and that could be enough alone. But he said stability is what he wanted. And, maybe that's financial stability for his family. Maybe that's wanting to live in a big city, though he claimed he loved the the 7-minute drive to work or whatever.
Yeah.
And then at his press conference at Wake Forest, he's like, "Oh, 300,000 people, big city. That's important to us." So maybe
He just wanted to get out of the Pacific Northwest.
I guess so. Yeah, the snow is snows a lot sometimes.
Yeah, the snow is a lot, especially when you drive beat up Camrys like me and Sam.
Yeah.
That is too much heartache for us.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough time for the Cougs. Seems to be a increasingly optimistic time for the Vandals, and it'll be fun because they'll meet August 30th at Martin Stadium, or Gisa Field at Martin Stadium, excuse me, for their Week 1 matchup, Vandals versus Cougs. And Ford is excited for that. He was asked about it. Coach Ford was asked about it today, and he said, "I hope they hire a head coach soon so I know who I have to beat." So, Cougars could end up being lapped by the Vandals. I feel like if they had faced this year, maybe not in September, but who knows? Vandals may have won. Vandals beat Wyoming, whereas Wazoo lost to Wyoming for a host of reasons at the end of the year when everyone's heads were elsewhere. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, that we'll get a definitive answer to that question, Cougs or Vandals, who will win next fall, and that should be pretty exciting.
Absolutely, and that's going to be a fun way to kind of look back on this whole process that we're now currently living in and seeing how both teams adjusted to the now, seemingly impossible when it started, coach casualties and transfer portal casualties, and, kind of seeing how they rebound when they play each other to start the football season. But that's going to do it here for the Lewiston Tribune podcast, episode number 14. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.